he says that Solomon is the son of God, David is the son of God, Israel is the son of God. He says we're all sons of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, children of God.
He says he's God in the Gospel of John. John 8:50.
Before Abraham was around, John 8:58. How does that make him God?
These Dawa guys truly do not understand the Bible. The term Son of God is not a univocal statement in the biblical text, which is to say, it doesn't have just one meaning. The term can refer to angels, signifying their role as God's heavenly ministers. It can refer to earthly kings, even those who engaged in the sin of polygyny, which reflects the culture of the ancient Near East, where human kings were frequently identified as the sons of a god. It can refer to the nation-state of Israel, signifying the fact that God spiritually begot them to be his covenant community. It can refer to the royal sons of God, that is to say, the numerous Israelite kings who were anointed to rule the nation, etc. With that said, let's move on to the two definitions that most people are familiar with: Christians as the sons of God, and the Lord Jesus as being God's unique son. The Bible teaches that when you become a Christian, you become God's son or daughter in the sense of adoption. Being born of God in this sense refers to putting your faith in God through Christ, thereby receiving God as your adoptive father, a concept foreshadowed in the Old Testament where the nation-state of Israel became God's son. And in the case of the Lord Jesus Christ, the term Son of God applies to him in the most unique way. Christ is the only begotten Son of God, meaning the only Son of God who was not brought into being from non-being. He is timelessly generated from the Father in eternity, thereby possessing the same nature as his begetter. Hence, all the statements where Christ applies to himself divine functions and prerogatives that are only true of God. Which brings us to John 8:58. But first, a little context. In verse 40, Christ tells his opponents, "But now you seek to unalive me. Abraham did not do this." And what exactly was that thing that Abraham did not do? Well, contextually, he didn't try to unalive Christ, unlike the Pharisees with whom Christ was speaking. And before you say something like, no, Christ is saying Abraham would not do something like this, look a little closer. In Greek, he says, "Touto Abraham uk epiisen." The word epiisen is the aorist active indicative third-person singular form of the verb pieo, which means to do or to make. The Greek aorist indicative typically refers to an action that was completed in the past without emphasizing the duration of said action. So in other words, it's past tense. Abraham did not do this. He didn't try to unalive Christ. And this can only make sense if Christ is saying that he was there with Abraham in the past. In verses 56 to 57, Christ says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was glad." And the Pharisees said to him, "You're not even 50 years old, and you've seen Abraham?" Wow, that's a very logical reaction to what Christ said, don't you think? How could Abraham have possibly seen you? He lived over 1,000 years ago, and you're not even 50 years old. To which Christ responds, "Most assuredly I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." The word translated as was is yeneste, which is derived from the word ginome, which means to become, to come into existence, begin to be, receive being, etc. And the term translated as I am is egoimi, which is actually the same word that God uses in reference to himself in the book of Isaiah. We see it here in chapter 41 verse 4, as well as here in chapter 43 verse 10, and finally here in chapter 48 verse 12. So Christ was effectively saying, it doesn't matter that I'm not even 50 years old, because unlike Abraham who came into existence, I have always existed, and I continue to exist up to the present moment. And this is precisely why the original Aramaic New Testament in plain English translates John 8:58 like this: Yeshua said to them, "Timeless truth I speak to you, before Abraham would exist, I am the living God." Robert Jameson draws attention to two words: was referring to Abraham and am referring to Christ. The first clause means that Abraham was brought into being, and the second clause refers to Christ saying, "I exist." So the meaning is not that Christ came to exist before Abraham, but unlike Abraham who began to exist, Christ never came into existence at all, but existed eternally before creation. And this is why his opponents tried to stone him, because they understood he was establishing himself as God's equal. And Robert M. Bowman Jr. notes that the Unitarian understanding of John 8:58, that Christ was eternally known by God in his foreknowledge, was effectively put to rest by the orthodox observation that the emphatic ego, or I, allowed for no other interpretation but that Christ himself eternally existed, since Christ doesn't mention foreknowledge in John 8:58, but instead says, "I am."